Hi everyone, welcome to Physics Simplified, my YouTube channel. I'm going to discuss with you all some exam techniques that you all should use when you're handling an exam question. So before we start, please subscribe my channel, like and share for more videos. Before we start an exam question, there are some exam techniques that we need to know that we should follow. First thing is the number of marks allocated for the question. The time allocated for the question is equal to the number of marks allocated for the question. Let's say the total marks allocated for the question is 10. You need to keep in mind that you cannot exceed 10 minutes for that particular question. 12 marks, 12 minutes. That is the maximum that you can spend, maximum time that you can spend for the question. Because the amount of marks allocated should be equal to the time allocated for the question as well. Then the other thing is the number of key points should be equal to the number of marks allocated. So let's say there's a part of a question which there are 3 marks allocated. So the number of points that is expected by the examiner would be 3. 2 marks, 2 points. 1 mark, 1 point. So the number of points depends on the amount of marks allocated for the particular part of the question. Right. Now, we have learned 2 things here, key important things that we need to keep in mind before we start the question. One is the time allocated for the question should be same as the total marks for the question. Second thing, marks allocated for each of the part represents the amount of key points that you need to write for that particular part. Right. The other key important thing is the command words, or we call it action words. I have taken some examples from the specification. You will be able to see these command words in specification as well as your textbook as well. At the end of the textbook, you have all these command words and definition. I'm not going to talk about all these command words. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just take some of these command words while we're doing the question so that you will be able to understand them better. In future, we'll be using most of these command words with the other questions that I'm planning to discuss. Let's take few and try to understand. For an example, first one, add or label. So you need to read and understand the definition. Requires the addition or labeling of stimulus material given in the question. For example, labeling a diagram or adding units to a table. It's pretty straightforward. Calculate. Obtain a numerical answer showing the relevant working. Let's read this again. Obtain a numerical answer showing a relevant working. Some of us do not show our working. We quickly take the calculator and do working just using the calculator and just write down the final answer. But the examiner expects you to show your working as well. When we do these questions, we'll try to understand how we can obtain each and every single mark showing this working. And it is important that you show your workings. Not lengthy steps, but the required steps. You will understand with your experience what are the required steps that you need to include in your working. Comment on. Requires the synthesis of number of variables from data, information, or from a judgment. And when it comes to compare, looking for similarities or differences of 2 or more things should not require drawing or a conclusion, right? It's just a comparison. The similarities and differences depends on the question. So likewise, there are command words, various command words that you will come across while you're doing these questions, exam questions. So the command word guides you as to what exactly you should do. Now, what is a keyword? And what are keywords? Keywords help you to understand exactly what you need to include in your answer. So the command words help command words guide you as to what you need to do, and the keywords will help you to uh, what what you need to what you need, I mean to decide what you need to include in your answer. Okay, so if you can understand command words and keywords correctly, you will be able to write your answer to the point. That is a main place where we tend to do a lot of mistakes. Sometimes we write a lot, but still we are not able to gain full marks. Why is that? Because we do not understand the command words. Maybe we miss out command words and keywords as well. So your answers are not to the correct point, and you are not able to gain full marks, even though you have spent a lot of time. So if I go back to the previous main two important points which we discussed, that is the amount of time allocated for the particular question and the number of key points that you need to mention in your answer, right? Let's say you have not understood all these and you're not aware of this, or maybe you really do not concentrate on these main key important factors. What you might do is you might just write an answer maybe based on the knowledge that you have with regards to the relevant area as per you understand at that point of the time in the exam, right? And you will write your own answer, but not the answer that is expected by the examiner. And at the same time, you are not really aware of the time factor, and you will spend a lot of time in writing this answer. And also your points are really not there in your answer. You have spent a lot of time. Finally, you tend to lose marks, lose time. You're not scoring marks as well as you're losing time as well, right? So that way, you will not be able to manage time and allocate time to rest of the other questions as well. So therefore, it is very important that before we start practicing exam questions, we are aware of these. So while practicing these exam questions, we got to keep these in mind, these exam techniques, and we need to consciously follow these exam techniques. And then that will become a practice. When we do this continuously, we'll get to a habit where we are always conscious about the time. We are always conscious about the marks. We are always conscious about command words and keywords. Time, marks, command words, and keywords. So these are key main areas what you need to keep in your mind. For the time being, we'll try to use these key important factors while we do these questions. I'll be teaching you all some more key important aspects in my future videos. I have taken a question from IGCSE Edexcel paper. Let's read the question. An aeroplane takes 2 minutes to travel the short distance between airports on 2 islands. The graph shows how the speed of the aeroplane changes as it takes off, flies across the sea, and then lands on the other island when it is flying across the sea. The aeroplane travels at a constant speed. Right. So the graph is also given. Right. You have the description here, and then you have a graph as well. Right. The graph represents more information which are additional to the description. Now, one thing that we need to understand here is we need to have enough knowledge to handle the question. That is also important. Enough knowledge to handle the question. Right now, there is a graph in front of us. Let's see how we can interpret the graph first of all. Right, when it comes to any graph, the first thing that you need to understand is what is represented by two axes. Right, the horizontal axis here represents time, and the units also. Right, it's given in units, seconds, and then the vertical axis represents speed in terms of meters per second. Right, the units are also important, not only the quantities. Right, and the first part of the graph has a positive gradient, and the second part of the graph is a horizontal line, and the third part of the graph has a negative gradient. Right, the positive gradient at the beginning and the negative gradient at the end. So these two gradients are constants. Right, we need to interpret, or we need to analyze the graph further. Right, that is based on our knowledge. The first part represents the acceleration. How do we know that? Because when it comes to speed time graph, velocity time graph, gradient represents the acceleration. Gradient represents the acceleration. That's our knowledge, right? So the horizontal line represents constant speed. As you can clearly see, when it comes to horizontal line, there is no change with regards to the speed. So means there is no change in speed. So the aeroplane does not accelerate or decelerate. There is no change in speed. By the first part, how do you know it is accelerating? Because the speed increases with the time. And when it comes to third part, it shows it shows deceleration. Why? Because the speed decreases with the time, and that is also given by the gradient. The gradients are constants, so therefore we have constant acceleration, then constant speed, and then constant deceleration. Right, now we understand the graph. What else can we understand through the graph? We know that area under the graph represents the distance. Right, area under the graph, if it is a velocity time graph, it is displacement. Speed, this is a speed time graph, so it represents area under the graph represents distance. Right, now we have a understanding of the knowledge required to handle this question as well. It is important that before we start a question, we have enough knowledge. So the knowledge is something that you gain through your class, your studying process. Before we start with exam questions, you need to have enough knowledge so that you can handle the question well. Right, let's look at the first question. Use the graph to answer the following questions. Right, the first question. State the value of the constant speed. State the value of the constant speed. State. State is the command word here. So we need to identify the command word. Command word is state. So what do you mean by state? So as you can see, give, state, name. All these three command words are very much similar in terms of the meaning. They generally all require recall of one or more pieces of information. Just a recalling of information. Now see in this question, the first question is for you just to recall your knowledge. There's nothing much to do here. It's very straightforward. It's a very straightforward question. State the value of constant speed. You just have to write the value. Now see how many marks are being allocated. There's only 1 mark allocated for the question. So then you need to understand there should be only one point. So basically you just have to write the value. So there is 1 mark allocated for the value of the speed. Even the units is given, right? Meters per second, that is given. So you just have to identify the value. How do you identify the value? You need to use the graph for that. So when you look at the graph, constant speed is higher than 40. It is higher than 40. But you are not able to exactly find the value. But you need to judge it based on the scale. So as we can understand, a 1 square in the vertical axis represents 5 meters per second, 5 meters per second. So definitely our value should be between 40 to 45. Looks like it's between 40 and 45. Then maybe 42.5. 42.5 would be the value. So it would be 42, 43. Right. Now this is the answer given in the mark scheme. So like I told you all, they have allowed the range between 42 to 43. The answer is 42, but they have allowed the range between 42 to 43. Your answer can be 42, 42.5 or 43. You can clearly understand that there is only one piece of information you have to write here to gain 1 mark. Right. We'll move to the second part. Calculate the acceleration of the aeroplane at the start of the journey and give the unit. Now in this case, what is the command word? What is the command word? Calculate the acceleration. Calculate. Calculate is the command word. Now we need to understand the meaning of calculate. Meaning of calculate is obtain a numerical answer showing relevant working. So sometimes we tend to miss the last part. We just obtain the numerical answer only. We tend to miss the last part, which is showing the relevant working. So according to Excel, your command word calculate means obtain a numerical answer showing the relevant working. So you got to show your working as well. That is important. Right. There are 3 marks for this question. Right? So your answer should have 3 points. Now we need to understand what are the 3 points that we need to include in this answer. Let's see what are the 3 points that should be included in this answer. Right. One is attempt to calculate the slope. There's a 1 point here. Attempt to calculate the slope. How do you calculate the acceleration? Through the slope. Mean the gradient. It means the gradient of the graph. That is rise over run. Then the second mark is for the answer and the third mark is for the unit. So attempt to calculate the slope, answer, unit. So these are the 3 areas, key areas that you need to show in your answer to gain all 3 marks. So if you have taken 42 as the rise or the velocity or the speed, and the time taken is 15 according to the triangle. So you take the particular triangle, biggest triangle that you can take. Usually you need to take the biggest triangle in order to make your final answer accurate. So the rise is 42, run is 15, right? So rise over run, 42 divided by 15, right? So here you are showing that you are trying to calculate the acceleration using the slope, and then you need to calculate the acceleration correctly, accurately. It becomes 2.8. So you are getting a 1 mark for the final answer. And for the units, you are getting another mark. So you can see there are two blanks. One is to calculate the value of the acceleration, and the other one is for the unit. So there are 2 marks for that. So altogether 3 marks. Now you are able to understand the connection with the number of points that you need to include in your answer based on the marks allocated for the question. Now we'll move to the third part, which is calculate the total distance that the aeroplane travels. Here again, you got to calculate, obtain numerical answer showing the relevant working. Same thing. There are 3 marks here. So now we can understand clearly there must be 3 points. So what do you think? Just pause and think. What are these 3 points? So I'll give you a few seconds. What do you think? What are the 3 key points that you need to show in your answer? Okay, let's see. These are the 3 points. Attempt to calculate an area under the graph line. So that's our knowledge. We know that distance is represented by the area under the graph. So you got to attempt to calculate the area under the graph. So the 1 mark is allocated for that. Then appropriate further working. For an example, adding the areas. Right? Maybe you can use the whole trapezium, or you can use 2 triangles and 1 rectangle in this case, like you can see here in the answer. And now I'm going to show you how we can calculate the distance traveled. As we know, distance traveled is equal to the area under the graph. So when we are calculating the area under the graph in this case, we can divide the area under the graph into 3 sections. Let me divide the area into 3 sections, A, B, and C. So as you can see, there are 2 triangles, A and C, and rectangle, which is B. We'll take these shapes separately and calculate the areas under each of the shape, and then we'll add up together. Right, when you take the first figure, the height is 42, which we have already found. And the base of the triangle is 15, because 1 square represents 5 seconds. So how many squares we have here? 1, 2, 3. So it should be 15. 5 into 3, 15. So then our area is half into 15 into 42. Half into base into height. So when you take area C, also has the same height, which is 42. What about the base? 1 square represents 5. So how many squares we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 25. Right. So then how can we calculate the area of C? It will be half into base 25 into height 42. So half into 25 into 42 gives you the area of C. Now we have to calculate area of B. So that is 80 into 42. How do you know it's 80? Because the value here is 15 and the value here should be 95. Right? You have 80, 85 here, 90 here, and 95 here, and 100 here. Right? 95. So the side would be 95 minus 15 minus 15, which is 80. So the area of B would be 80 into 42. What you can do is you should add these three areas, that is the area of A plus area of B plus area of C. So you will get the final answer, which is the distance traveled. And there's another method that you can calculate the area. This is a trapezium. So you are able to calculate the area of the trapezium straight away as well. It doesn't matter. Examiner's comments are available in the Excel website. Together with the past papers, we are able to find mark schemes as well as examiner's comments. Examiner's comments basically give us an analysis of performance of students for each and every question. Now let's try to understand key important points that the examiner has given to us related to the question that we have done today. Over 2/3 of students gain 5 or more marks out of 7 marks. So now you can place yourself based on the marks that you have obtained based on this guideline. Often one of the marks missed was for misreading a scale either in part 1 speed incorrectly as 45 meters per second. So that is why I'm saying y'all, it is very important that you at the beginning that you understand the scale of the graph. In part 3, the times were shown as 20, 90 or 30 seconds. So same thing. So the students have misread these values. So this is one of the key areas that we need to be concerned when we do these kind of questions. Because you should not, like, question might be easy, but we should not be hurried to complete the question. And also, once the question is completed, you should double check your answer. That is how you can eliminate these kind of silly mistakes. Another common error was to omit the factor half when calculating areas. So that's again a silly mistake. We should not actually allow yourself to do. Only few students use trapezium method in part 3. So most of the students have used two triangles, addition of two triangles and the rectangle. So that is used by most of the students. Right. So now you can understand it's very important that you analyze the examiner's comments in order for you to understand what are the areas that you might or you tend to make mistakes. So that helps you to be aware of the type of mistakes a student can make, and you can concentrate, you can focus more on this. So what you should do is, when you go through examiner's comments, based on your answer, you should you should note down these key points so that you can refer to them when you study your notes later on. A very small minority of students fail to show their workings for these calculations. And some of them have not mentioned the calculation. So I clearly told you all that you should, when it comes to calculations, you should show the workings as well. But some of the students have not done it. But very less number of students have not shown the working. So majority of the students have shown their workings. So that's it for the day. Guys, I'll see you all soon with another exam question and some of the exam techniques. So do subscribe, like and share for more of my videos. Bye bye.